So we are going to get going on our third forum in October. I am so excited to be here today. I'm Meredith and I'm with the Forums Committee. One of the things that I personally love about coming to the forum on Sundays is that it's a chance to learn more about each other in a smaller group, to learn more about the great work going on in our community and also people in our community who are doing amazing things with their lives and changing and helping the lives of others. So today we have with us the pastor, the minister. Yes. I've learned that Reverend comes next. We're not quite at Reverend yet, but we're going to learn more about that, but Jill Braithwaite. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about her journey to UU ministry, as well as what that all means kind of behind the curtains. How does one become a UU pastor? I am gonna turn it over here to Jill, and thanks to all of you for coming, both online. We've got a great crowd gathered online and here in the room. We're gonna go until about 10:15, and then we start transitioning over to the service. So just wanna make sure that we stay on time, but we have plenty of time for a really good conversation. So with that, thanks so much.
Thank you, Meredith. What a joy to be here with the forum folk for the first time on a Sunday morning. Typically, I'm running around scrambling, getting ready for worship on a Sunday, and so it is very good to be in the presence of the forum folks instead of seeing you from over there as we're preparing worship. Yeah, and it's Therese Presley and her new knee are here with us, and that is lovely to see. Walking around. It looks like the new knee works, and that is a good thing to see. And hello specifically to the folks on Zoom. Good to see all of you. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about my road to ministry, road to UUCD, and along the way, we'll hit some of the requirements that the UUA has for aspiring ministers. Talk a little bit about that too at the end, and then leave some time for Q&A, as Meredith said, as we get ready to move to the service. So, recently, for that UUA ministry credentialing process, I had to write a biographical essay, a narrative of your life, that included who you are and where you come from, and also asked us to detail our call to ministry. What is it that brought you to ministry, and what do you want to do with that? And I took time, instead of jumping into just the details of the story, I took a minute to step back and think about, okay, what's a large theme? What right now at this time and place, what is the large theme that finds itself expressed in all of my life? And this is the two sentences that poured out of me. I'm just going to share them. If there is one thing that has consistently sustained me throughout my life, it is a feeling in my core of being in love with the world, with deep affection for the whole shebang. I find joy all over the place, in art, in conversation and relationships, in my own and others' humor, and in life's absurdities. I was just making absurd jokes with a couple folks there in the second row. I find joy in seeking to understand how people and things work in history and politics, science and nature, psychology and spirituality. And the privileges for me of whiteness and middle-class status, along with my gregariousness and appetite for art and culture and curiosity, have made it possible to move through the world chasing these goals and this joy. So that's just to put that out there as a kind of theme for me throughout my time, and that comes up as I move toward ministry as well in my life. So indeed, I grew up in a middle-class family, and my father worked for IBM, and we moved states, I think 4 times before I was 9 years old. Ended up in a predominantly white small town in southern Minnesota, Byron. Anybody? Near Rochester. And thanks to affordable higher education, I ended up at college at age 17 at the University of Minnesota. Can't even believe what tuition cost in that day. It's too sad, I won't say it out loud. But it was doable for a kid with no help other than what I earned. I was so thrilled to get to the big city. That was something I was craving, the diversity and the vitality of urban life in Minneapolis. And I got a fake ID and went to First Avenue because I had just seen Purple Rain in the theater, and I couldn't wait to enjoy some of those things in Minneapolis. I was not a party animal downtown, but that was something that was on my list after seeing Purple Rain. I got to go see First Avenue. I was really chomping at the bit to learn about the world and launch into adulthood. And in college, that's what I did. I embraced it fully, dove into the humanities. I started as an electrical engineering major. I was a math and science kid too. Loving school is a great theme of my life as well. But the humanities called to me. It was a time of a lot of political protest too. And I dove into that world as well, art and culture and literature and politics. After college, I had a narrow brush with law school, got in, decided to take a deferment year, and ended up taking a turn into book publishing. I launched a career in book publishing that would last 30 years. And still I do a little bit of consulting work on the side in book publishing. I'm actually working on a little project with Skinner House Books, our UUA imprint. So there I started as an editor in book publishing, and it was mostly children's books that I worked on throughout my career. And then I was a marketing director at one point, did a lot of product development work. And that was a place where my strengths really stood out. This product development for me was about taking in information about customers, kids, what do they love, what works in books, what's special, and then what are the company's goals? What kind of books are fit with our mission? How do we want to publish them? Here you have a $4 million budget. Take that, turn it into books published, and bring us back $6 million. Was a summary of a lot of what I was charged with throughout my career. You know, that financial responsibility, but the art of making books too. That combo of art and business has always been at the center of my work and has fit really well. And that love of both the art and business of publishing was what helped me kind of move up the publishing ladder. And I ended up, second to last job I had in publishing was as vice president and publisher in the company that used to be called Augsburg Fortress Press, the Lutheran publisher. It's now called 1517 Media. And if anybody knows why 1517, raise your hand. That's the year Martin Luther did his thing. Yeah. Yes, I see some people though. Yeah. With the 95 Theses where he kicked off the Protestant Reformation, which I've been talking about from the pulpit recently. So in my mid-30s, during that, as I was building that career and continuing to build this social and cultural life in Minneapolis, I also started actively developing a spiritual life. I had walked away from religion entirely, been raised Lutheran, it was fine, went to college and forgot all about religion. And then, yeah, like I said, in my mid-30s, I was like, so a little bit of emptiness here. Maybe I need a spiritual life, an intentional spiritual life, and more community. And that was when I found a spiritual home at First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. How many folks are familiar with that? Yeah, a lot of us, yeah. Yeah, and so that love of the world that I talked about at the beginning, that took shape in a new way. It took shape in being expressed and lived out in a community intentionally. And First Universalist is it has the name Universalism in it. I came in, I think, to Unitarian Universalism as primarily a Unitarian, that kind of rational, critical thinking, urban, very into revelation is not sealed, as I was talking about last Sunday, I think, the intellectual piece. And First Universalist added to that, to make me fully a Unitarian Universalist, added the universalism, the deep love, that passionate love for all, the big saving love, God's saving love as they expressed it back in the day. That love at the center of our faith that is about a transforming force in our lives and in the world. So that got added, and that is how I became what I would say is a full Unitarian and Universalist both. Does that make sense? So I got into church life, a few volunteer things, and then in 2010, when I was in the process of quitting smoking, I embraced the 12-step method of working with a higher power. I was in Al-Anon, that's been also a large part of my journey. And I loved thinking about higher power, God, theology, the divine, what works for people, ideas around higher power, the sacred, the holy. And then there was a morning, and I preached about this night in late August. Forgive me if this is repetitive for some of you. I was doing more and more prayer and meditation, and I had this experience of letting go of trying to control the pain of addiction and knowing that I didn't want to quit, but I wanted to quit, and that struggle. And in that prayer and meditation time, I had this letting go feeling of kind of falling into a cosmic net of some kind. The great everythingness was what I was seeking contact with, and a feeling of being caught by that. And that was a big moment in my spiritual journey of kind of an embodied experience of the seventh principle, I would say in some ways, the interdependent web of existence of which we are all part, which for me is a basic description of my higher power, so to speak. If that makes sense. So that big love of the world was expanding again in this kind of connection with the great divine mystery, the great everythingness. And that got me started thinking about seminary. And so in 2012, I went to seminary for the first time. And I manufactured a part-time job with a publishing company, went to school full-time, did part-time work for 3 years while I did that master's degree. I was interested in theology and the arts. I mean, the arts and literature have been such a big part of my life. So that was what my first master's degree was in, theology and the arts. I toyed with the idea of ministry, but I was like, no, I'm going to go back to publishing. This was like a mid-career sabbatical. I'm going to go back to publishing where I'm building this career. I wrote a master's thesis about one particular novel, about how that novel is how literature can be theology. And that's something that I so love about Unitarian Universalism. That is one of the main things for me that I'm attached to, that revelation, spiritual and religious truth is to be found everywhere. Here in this room, out there in the trees, and in a novel that can teach us something. The title of the thesis, let me think. It was about the novel Infinite Jest. Infinite Jest as a source of theology about sin and salvation. And I wrote about how that novel actually has had expressions of it about sin and salvation that are more in sync with how Unitarian Universalists hold that to be. And so that was a wonderful experience, digging hard into art and literature. How can that be theology, not just a book, but an old book. New books can be theology as well. So as I climbed publishing's corporate ladder more, after that, going back to publishing, I started to get more connected to my generative self, a self that was interested in helping build futures for organizations, for people. I was mentoring a lot of employees that I was working with, really enjoying that work of helping the next generation in publishing, that is still near and dear to me. And I started going all in on church. I got asked to be on the strategic planning team, the board of trustees, doing the whole thing, teaching Sunday school, RE here. I'm used to translating for larger audiences and saying Sunday school. Teaching RE for about 5 years, doing the coming of age program too. And I got more and more interested in equity work too. In publishing, for me, that took the shape of setting a goal that an imprint's list would have 50% BIPOC authors, Black, Indigenous, and people of color authors, and committing to that as a staff. Sometimes falling short, but publishing is a notoriously white business. And we made the goal of, no, we're gonna do more to have equity in our authors on our list. And that was deeply satisfying work. And at First Universalist on the board, we were also starting an anti-racism journey there. And changing policies like our vendor selection policy started to involve an equity review of who are we choosing as our vendors. And so that was also a very fruitful time. And the whole congregation went through anti-racism training. So in publishing, after that first run at seminary, I had this series of very desirable jobs, including that vice president and publisher job. I mean, on paper, that was like, I've done it. I've climbed to the top of the hill. Here I am. I should be happy. All these notes from friends. This is the crowning glory of your publishing career. And I could not get happy there. That call to ministry that had been whispering at me for so many years started like clanging like a bell. And I was noticing that the work that I continued to love in publishing was the relational pieces, like doing a retreat, mentoring folks, working on mission and vision and values and equity work. Less interested in some of the more businessy, hierarchical focused pieces of publishing work. And so in February 2020, I did a silent retreat in the desert in February 2020, mind you, in the desert in Arizona, and really confirmed that ministry was what I wanted to do. And then I don't know if you're aware, but in March 2020, the world went a little bit bananas. And so that like kind of slowed me down just a teeny tiny bit, but it also fully confirmed my call with the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic and the inequities that all of that exposed and brought into our faces, the uprising, seeing the potential for people taking power and transforming the world for justice. All of that stuff in 2020 invigorated, one, my belief in Unitarian Universalism's saving message of love. And two, it invigorated my desire to spend the rest of my working life with my team, with my fellow Unitarian Universalists in the work of bringing about beloved community, the work that all of you are engaged in. And this brought that core love of the world into a new expression as my vocation. This was not just something that in my free time or in some church volunteer work. Now I was like, all right, both feet in, going all in on a core love that expresses itself personally in relationships, in community, and in the larger picture for me. So this was at this time in seminary, I went back to seminary and finished the requirements for the Master of Divinity, which involved like 2 more years of school. That's a more extensive degree than a Master of Arts. And so, yeah, finish that Master of Divinity, do some of the core courses. 4 scripture courses are required for a Master of Divinity, working through those, lots of history, deep theology classes. My first round, I had done a lot of worship arts classes, a ton of arts classes. But that second round was finishing out the more ministerial vocation kind of classes. And it became clear to me that parish ministry was where I wanted to be for a few reasons. I am a generalist at heart. I'm sure some of you have that feeling, like I'm interested in all of it. And I don't necessarily go deep with a particular subject. Like I could never do a PhD in medieval literature or something and stick with that one area for such a long time. I like the whole shebang. As I said before, the whole shebang is compelling to me, and I like to learn about and engage in such a variety. I'm also an institutionalist, which factors into my call to parish ministry. I believe in the power of our institutions to do good in the world, to hold space for our transformative justice and love work in the world. I want this church to be here. This phrase came up the other day, for people in the future, for others. So it matters to me the careful stewardship of our institutions and our communities. And parish ministry also works for me so much because I really love connecting with people, building relationships and getting to know new folks, welcoming newcomers, that kind of work. So in May of 2022, I finished all but one class. I just had one left. And then I did what we call CPE that summer. Anybody know the term CPE? It's a chaplaincy internship that's required for UU ministry. Not all Master of Divinity degrees require it, I think, and not all nations require it, I think. But to become a UU minister, that is one of the requirements, to do a 3-month full-time chaplaincy internship where you are placed in some kind of healthcare setting and perform the work of a chaplain and learn in a really intense way how to do pastoral and spiritual care. I was placed in a senior living facility in Edina, Minnesota, and worked mostly in the transitional care unit there, and also with assisted living folks and in the memory care unit. It was a transformative experience, learning about how to be present with people in the moment, how to offer spiritual care in a way that is present but not fixing, not directive, deep listening skills. And that was a great joy. And I felt like, yes, that was where I really was like, yes, this is what I want to do, be a minister. That was a great time. And in the fall then of 2022, I started a ministerial internship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Minnetonka. And who knows the Minnetonka Church? Yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah, our churches around the state are connected, aren't they? And that, of course, is where you start practicing being a minister in all the ways that means. And Minnetonka was a small enough church that I got to experience every part of parish ministry there and do that work and start new initiatives and under a supervisor. And so that's another big part of the requirements for the ministerial fellowship committee. In early 2023, after I finished that last class and had the MDiv and the Master of Divinity degree in December 22, I finished them. So in early 2023, I was not eligible to be ordained and have a settled ministry, but I requested approval and got approval to do a contract ministry, a 1-year contract ministry, and that's what I came here to do. Shortly after that approval, I applied for the job here at UUCD and ended up getting that job. So here I am. So this takes us nicely to a few minutes about, maybe I'm ahead of schedule here, Meredith. I don't know, it's all right. Wow. Takes us to the 5 minutes about, and we can do Q&A too, about UUA requirements of aspiring ministers. Would it bore you to tears if I kind of ticked off what the requirements are? It's not a short list, my friends. Get comfortable. Do you have a pillow? Get a little more beverage? No. It's not that bad. I'll leave out some of the things like digital photograph, headshot. That was an easy one. So there's a biographical information form, that narrative essay that I mentioned earlier, that narrates your life journey and call to ministry, a career assessment report, and that involved, I want to say, 10 hours of psychological testing, and then 4-5 hours of an interview with a psychiatrist, and they create a report that goes into your file that goes to the ministerial fellowship committee. These are all the things that go to the ministerial fellowship committee. It's ultimately a 141-page packet that was created and finished in early October. I'll get back to the list. Don't worry, I'm going to tick off this list. I've been working hard on this list for a couple of years, but so this packet goes to the committee, and that's what this panel of 15 people will use to learn about me and then interview me in an interview appointment for an hour on December 1st. It just got set, the date and time. And that's the committee that decides whether to welcome a new minister into what they call preliminary fellowship. And that's the fellowship of ministry. That's what makes you eligible for ordination. And churches use that to decide whether this new minister is someone they want to call for ministry or hire. So back to this list. Number 5 is statements of competence and reading list. There's 7 areas of competency that we're expected to be competent in, and there's a reading list associated with each of those areas. Some have, I don't know, 50 books on them, some are optional, it's complicated, but by the end, I haven't counted it up because I don't really want to know the total number, but I think it's like 130 books on this required reading list. And you make a check mark by them to say, yes, I've read this. And a lot of them get read in seminary classes, but not all of them. And then there's essays for each of you write an essay for each of the competence areas. There are part of the packet is also the evaluation, the self-evaluation for your chaplaincy internship, the supervisor evaluation. For your internship, there are 3 evaluations: self, there's a committee for your internship, as you may know, and your supervisor's evaluation. Again, are we falling asleep here with this list? No? Maybe a little? There are 5 letters of recommendation that go into that packet as well from a variety of people. Transcripts from school, criminal background check, and that's what goes into that packet. Yeah, and so October 2nd was the day I submitted my last thing for that. That was a big milestone. Yes, just to get the packet done. It's a big deal. Yeah. Thank you for that. So those are the basics of my journey to ministry. I'm gonna stop and ask if there are questions about any of what I've been speaking about. Do you have, oh, good, you have no notes.
I've been monitoring the chat too to see if there are questions coming in, so I'll keep track of that. You don't have to worry about that. And we've got a first question over here with Carol.
So maybe I fell asleep in part of this. No, I'm sure I didn't. But are you allowed to do what most ministers do, like marrying people, being there for people when they're dying, things like that?
Good question. Yes, there is no restriction on my ability to officiate at weddings and memorial services. And that's in our denomination. We do not make restrictions on that for those things. I mean, I think different churches and different individuals might have certain thoughts about that. Like if it was my first year of seminary, I would expect for folks to have perhaps different ideas about whether I'm able to do one of those rites of passage with them. as it stands in my internship in pastoral care, I did have experience and continue to have experience with all those kinds of things. So that's one of those subtle questions. I imagine in other denominations there are more, you gotta hit this and then you can do a wedding perhaps. But in Unitarian Universalism, that's less the case. Does that make sense?
I was asking because I'm 81 and I might.
Next, we have a question from online, and this is from Brett. Going through the process of UU theological education, would you change anything if you had the chance to switch up the curriculum?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's very common for folks to say they wish for more practical classes in seminary. I took one required class was organizational leadership and administration, and so there's literally 1 week about church budgets in that class. And so for a lot of seminarians who come from helping professions, that is insufficient training for working with church budgets. That is one of the famous things that people complain about theological education for ministers not having enough practical stuff. For me, coming from my business background, that was not an issue. I was, kind of relieved that that class was not more extensive because I had, 20 years of experience with budgeting, management, mission, vision, strategic planning. So that was my thinking about that. For Unitarians, sometimes folks have complaints about the scripture requirements. And while I was in seminary, they did start to allow non-Bible scripture classes to count for that. I took an introduction to the Quran class that counted for one of my scripture classes, and Buddhist scriptures was a very popular class at my seminary. Sorry, Zoom folks, stepping away here.
A question from the audience, from Therese. What seminary did you go to?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. I went to United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities, which is originally founded by the UCC back in the day, 2 small seminaries that combined to form what is now an ecumenical seminary.
Jill, is that a specific seminary for people who enter the ministry after or mid-career? Because believe it or not, I have an 87-year-old cousin in Cross Lake, and that's in his will to donate to this specific seminary in the cities that helps people going into ministry as their second career.
Yeah, with a little white hair, perhaps. The white hair, new ministers. It is not specifically for that. There is a variety of ages there, but I will say that I think for Unitarian Universalist ministry, what I've heard is that the average age for folks starting a seminary is, I think, 46, something like that. So that it's really common for Unitarian. Well, and it's also, I think that makes sense as so many of us come to Unitarian Universalism later in life. Yeah, like I was, I think, 35 when I signed a book or something like that. Yeah. And then 10-ish years later, went to seminary for the first time. Yeah, so I fit that profile. Yeah, so it is all ages. Yeah, that's a unique seminary. And now I just have to brag that United Theological Seminary has been, pagans, Buddhists, Hindus, so many different varieties of Christianity. It was a marvelous place to do interfaith dialogue, very stimulating in that way. But now the largest group, the largest denomination represented at that seminary is Unitarian Universalists, my friends. Such a vibrant community of those folks. And 60% of the student body is from around the country. Because it was an online friendly seminary before the pandemic. Like I took classes where huge screens on all 4 walls, so you were interacting with people in real time on screens all over the country.
I'm just gonna go back to the chat here for a sec, but I also just want to acknowledge that this is a very, very well attended forum, and we've got 16 people online and almost 25, I think, in the room. So just excited to see so much interest in this topic. There's a suggestion online. I'm going to phrase as a question. So this is from David Peterson. Would it be possible to have the minister wear a larger unique name tag stating minister, maybe a hat, like something, and name at church events to make it evident, more evident that she is the leader of the congregation, and also might she wear a stole at the service as a special edition? And I am learning lots of new vocabulary because I don't know what a stole is. Could you please explain what a stole is?
Is that your mic or? Okay. Fun questions. I will not wear a hat. I respectfully reject the hat idea. But I think that name tag is a great idea. That's one of those things every Sunday I think, dang, I should have a name tag on, and then I forget to ask whoever I need to ask about making a name tag for me. So thank you for raising that. Yes, of course. Yes. So I will pursue the name tag thing. Stole, yes, and that's an interesting one. In our denomination, there aren't hard, fast, forbidding restrictions, and yet the tradition that I was schooled in is that, by the mentors that I've worked with, is that a stole is not appropriate to wear. Appropriate might be a strong word. Becomes appropriate to wear after one is ordained. And typically at an ordination service, one is presented with a stole that has been designed in working with the minister, but designed by a committee and lovingly created. There are a few people who specialize in stole making in the denomination. And so on Facebook, I got friended by stole makers as soon as I hit a certain point in this process. I was like, oh, the stole makers, that's some retail service. They go one by one looking for customers on Facebook. Yes. Yeah, so some people will wear stoles before they're ordained. I mean, it's not like you're gonna burst into flames if you do that. And with clergy collars, the same thing. That is more acceptable for non-ordained ministers to wear a clergy collar. I have worn the clergy collar mostly only when I'm doing political protest and advocacy and witness work, like at the legislature. When I go to the legislature or out on the street in a protest, I wear a collar. Yeah. Did that hit all of Brett's questions, Jake? Or whoever else, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, and the suggestion.
Your final comment sort of leads into my question. Could you talk a little bit about what role you think you have or should have officially as a minister of this church in social justice work?
Well, that's an interesting question. We just talked about that at a board workshop, a startup workshop with UUA regional staff. As a part-time minister, all of you know that I'm 3/4 time here. That's what I have. And so for part-time ministry, the UUA is thinking a lot about this because this is just becoming more and more common. And the UUA now is making strong recommendations that you carefully define a part-time minister's portfolio to make it manageable, to not spread them so thin that it just doesn't work. Part-time ministry they believe, and I do too, that it works best when there are these defined, here's your areas of responsibility. And for the other areas, the lay ministry, the ministry of the congregation, which is obviously the big ministry of a congregation that really gets things done. So much of the work of the congregation is you are key ministers of the congregation, as you well know. And so to define what belongs to that group. And so when the board and I met with Phil Lund and did a startup workshop, we defined my priorities for this role as worship, which is a big chunk of time in the 75% role. and pastoral care and administration, staff development and supervision, and supporting the board in its work. And then there are other pieces that are in there, but that's the core of my portfolio of responsibilities here. Does that make sense? And that's very typical of a part-time minister. I'm hearing more and more part-time ministries are successful when the responsibilities are very defined, just like that. Yeah, Barb.
Do you have an idea where your ordination will occur? Do we get to have a party for it? Or is that gonna be-
I have not started thinking about that. I want to clear this MFC hurdle. I'd almost feel like it might jinx it. I mean, that's kind of insane, but yeah, that's a good question to discern about. Yeah.
That's level party. So,
Right.
there's another question from online. What wisdom do you think you would tell your younger self now that you are on your way to becoming an ordained minister?
What was that from the crowd?
Quit smoking earlier.
Well, heck yes. Heck yes to that. I think to be more in tune with and driven by my core gut instincts about what I'm meant to do in this world. I think, the call to ministry for me started in high school. I was into church at that time. And there is actually, I thought about bringing this today. There's actually in 11th grade health class, we had to create a life timeline that projected out into the future, all of your life. So imagine what this timeline looks like, your little years up to age 16. And then you make up what you think is going to happen for the rest of your life. And I did have myself getting an MDiv and becoming a Lutheran minister at that time. I even had myself going on to get a doctorate of ministry, which how did I even know what that was at age 16? And theater was also when I was very into theater in high school. I was also direct community theater and become a Lutheran minister. But I literally forgot about that until like 2019 when I was like, publishing, really starting to move toward that call. So that is a big part of it for me, like that. And I had that intuition in my heart that working for a collective suited me better, that having diversity and equity work in my job would suited me better. But I didn't go there until 2020 really unleashed it. So that heeding those deep intuitions is what I might advise myself to do a little more.
So thank you so much. And I just, I'm sharing the mic now to say, can we please thank Jill for this wonderful conversation this morning. So inspiring to hear about your story. I just so appreciate it. And one of the people I'd really like to thank this morning for making it possible is Tom Betts, and I'm not seeing him around, but he set up all of the audio and made it so that we could hear ourselves and each other and communicate in the virtual and the real room. So anyway, thank you, Tom, wherever you are.
I think he went home to stay in a window.
He had to go home to stay in a window, apparently. But and also to invite everybody back next week for the the board update. Every quarter we have someone from the board join us and give us an update about what they're up to. Is that you, Elisa? Okay, all right. So anyway, we have that to look forward to.
And I just want to say thank you so much for showing up and for your good questions and for your interest in meeting the minister and about my journey, and if I didn't cover anything that is like a burning question for you, let me know.